Say hello to oyster bunnies.
Voices blending, melodies ascending, harmony in the air. Our songs are never ending. In the barbershop we create magic. Brad and John show, yeah. It's pure classic. No instruments needed, just our vocal range. Notes flying high, it's our musical exchange. Tracy's station may try, but they can't compete. Our barbershop style, it can't be beat. Oh, the harmony of voices, so sweet. In the barbershop of life, our tunes will repeat. No need for instruments, no need for a band. Just the Brad and John show, the finest in the land.
Yes, it is the Brad and John Show, and it's the Brad and John Show for Friday. Good morning, John Combest. You know what that means?
What does it mean, Brad?
It means it's time for the Polka Boys.
Time for the John Combest Top 3.
It is time for the John Combest Top 3. Every single day of his life for the past 23 years, John puts together an extensive list of all the important stuff you should know about that's going on in the state of Missouri. Some people call it the Drudge Report of Missouri, but we just call it JohnCombests.com. JohnCombest.com, that's what we call it. And on Friday morning, especially, we bring here the Polka Boys to bring in a special homage to John Combest and his top 3. And we start off with this guy right here.
I'm Casey Kasem.
And we kick off the countdown with...
In third place,
Each of our top 3 stories in A Block today will be in some way an homage to your friend and mine, Brad Hildebrand. Station owner, provocateur, raconteur, as they might say in France. The number 3 story today comes from a progressive outlet called the Kansas Reflector. It's part of that big nationwide liberal operation that also runs the Missouri Independent. There's a gentleman there, a content creator named Tim Carpenter, and he has a piece about former Kansas City Mayor Sly James. And they talk about ICE and immigration. They talk about city issues. You know, Sly James was part of a forum. He's a consultant now. He's an old guy. He's in his 70s. He just does a little tinkering around and consulting, and probably that's what he does to pay the bills. But there's a joyful nugget in there that reminds me of my friend Brad Hildebrand. Tim Carpenter, the content creator, pulled it out and put it in the headline. Here's a headline. Former Kansas City Mayor Sly James shares insights into grappling with cave people. You know what we're talking about, Brad, because you taught me the phrase cave, citizens against virtually everything. And Sly James goes on to say that when he wanted to make improvements to the Kansas City airport, which I think, if you ask a lot of people, including me, I thought it used to be dreadful. I haven't been there since it's been rebuilt. But he says when you're dealing with an airport or you're dealing with pretty much anything in a metro area, if you try to put something new in or tinker with something people claim they don't like, a group of people will arise, citizens against virtually everything, and oppose any sort of progress. Brad, this is a fellow oldster after your heart. He feels the same way as you do about progress and people blocking it. And for folks who didn't catch the show yesterday, if you go to B Block, Brad had a great piece that I hadn't heard about, which was folks in St. Louis City and elected officials in St. Louis City talking about opposing data centers in the city too. Anyway, Brad, so for story number 3, an homage to Brad Hildebrand, citizens against virtually everything, which is, as you know, a radical offshoot of NIMBY. Not in my backyard.
Did he really say, did he actually refer to it as cave, as the cave people?
He did. Here's his direct quote. They're called cave people. C-A-V-E. It stands for Citizens Against Virtually Everything. Dealing with skeptics and C.A.V.E. people was always difficult. Now, what I like about this piece by Tim Carpenter, to give him credit, even though he is a progressive, Brad, we know that he actually wrote it because in the very first sentence, he managed to spell Sly James's name wrong. He spelt it S-Y-L, as if Sly James is actually Sylvia. So in some ways, that type of typo reassures me that actually a human did this. It would be like the Super Freedom Caucus and Super Freedom Caucus being spelled incorrectly. I knew that a human didn't. A human did it and didn't rely on AI, you know?
You know, John, we have, I'm telling you, with this whole thing with the NIMBYs and the C.A.V.Es, we are slowly but surely grinding our way down to nothing can be done anywhere. You know what I'm saying? It's just to the point where if you decide you want to plant, I mean, do you know, in some this is the crazy thing. In some homeowners associations, if you want to put in a tree or take out a tree, you have to get permission. Now, think about that for a minute. I mean, I'm going like, what? If you're going to put a tree in and they have to approve it. Matter of fact, your favorite place out there in, what is the place we kid about?
Newtown.
Newtown. I don't know if it's still there. I personally saw it with my own eyes years ago because a friend of mine showed me around Newtown. This is when Newtown was very new. And he showed me there was a spot near, I guess, Town Center or something like that, where it had a wall of all the approved paint colors. And if you were going to paint your place in Newtown, you had to go pick out one of the paint colors. But more importantly, you couldn't pick out a color that either of your neighbors had. So in other words, if your neighbor had beige and the other neighbor had like said off-white, those were excluded. You couldn't use those two colors. I'm going, what?
That makes perfect sense. It's my second favorite part of Newtown. The first favorite part of mine is the graveyard where lost old men get buried that can't make their way to a Mike Elam fundraiser.
Is that me?
Oh, did that happen to you, Brad?
Oh, it did, John. Okay, you're not going to let that gun go. Okay, here we go. Number 2.
Up a notch to number 2.
A second piece, which is an homage to Brad Hildebrand. I have a new built-in excuse for you, Brad. Well, Brad needs a lot of excuses in life. But let's say you have the first in-person meeting of the Westplex Chamber of Commerce. Westplex Chamber of Commerce offers a great value. You can join for free. And then for an upsold membership, so to speak, you could also get ads on Brad's station. But I digress. We're not just plugging Brad here. Brad, if you ever have an in-person event for the Westplex Chamber, and maybe you don't get the attendance you want, or you don't get the RSVPs, you have a built-in excuse. Brad, if you ever get godsquad.cloud together, what's our address? Well, you can't drive there yet, at least not for now, as the ads say. If your pews aren't filled at the God Squad Church, Brad, we have an excuse for you. And that excuse is brought to us by Daniel Neiman of the Post-Dispatch. You know, he used to be a food reporter, Brad, and now he's doing features for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Headline, St. Louis Hispanic Festival expects lower turnout for fear of ICE raids. Brad, the next time you have an in-person event, and maybe you're not getting the RSVPs you want, just tell people you think people are terrified of ICE. That's what this group of Mexicans did. Now, back in June, there was some sort of Mexican get-together in Florissant, and, well, there were no reports or even rumors of ICE showing up. But you know what? There's a big one coming up in 2 weeks, September 19th to 21st. Sorry, in 1 week, September 19th to 21st at Soulard Park. And here's what this woman, Elisa Bender, has to say. We do expect it to affect our numbers. And when she's talking about it, the pronoun there, she's talking about the fear of ICE agents. She says, there's an undercurrent of fear that's going through our community. At the same time, we've taken steps to make sure our community is safe and feels safe. She does not expect the kind of crowds that they usually get, Brad. And one man is to blame, Donald Trump. So I include this story, Brad, not just because it's a bunch of Mexicans complaining and some woman complaining because she's not going to get the attendance and people are going to blame her. And she says, not my fault, it's Donald Trump. At least now, Brad, you know that there's a viable excuse when you don't get the attendance you want. Just blame it on ICE.
Which reminds me, I think ICE showed up at the Pride Fest. Wasn't that why attendance was down at the Pride Fest as well, too? I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I think so. They were looking for some of those people that were grooming.
Man, John. See, you said something interesting because of the fact that, remember, yesterday I declared my new branding of me personally. I'm not a conservative. I'm not a liberal. I'm not a whatever you want to call it. Not a libertarian. I am an American, John.
Boy, that is novel, Brad. How long did it take you to come up with that one?
John.
How many Mountain Dews did you have to chug to get caffeinated enough for that?
You're really making fun of me on that, aren't you?
Yeah. It's the lowest level base thing that you say to somebody in a barbershop. When you don't want to talk about politics, you say, well, I don't know, I'm an American, because who can assail it? Right. It makes everybody happy.
Right, you know? Right. And remember, it's like my thing of de-escalation. If somebody says, hey, are you a liberal, or are you a progressive, are you a conservative? Hey, man, I'm an American. Oh, okay, that's fine.
Now, you used to tell people you were an anarchist, right?
No, I've never been an anarchist.
I thought you used to tell. I thought that was your opening line. When a police officer would pull you over because you have a series of letters as your license plate, you would do two things. You would execute the perfect stop. I don't know. I should have my son tell you that story, Brad. Have I ever had my son tell you that story about the perfect traffic stop? My piece is at 3:00. Anyway, you would tell them that you were an anarchist. And then the police officer would say, oh, I'm sorry, sir. I always let anarchists and sovereign citizens go. Be on your way.
John, no, that's not what I do. First off, I would pull my AR-15 out of the back seat and put it on my dashboard. I would rev my engine up. I would jump out of the police car. I would jump out of my car, take that attack stance and say, do you know who I am?
There you go. That's the magic line, Brad. It's the magic line for law enforcement.
That's the perfect traffic stop. We ready for number one?
Oh, give it to us, Brad.
The number one.
Fortuitously and subconsciously, I just mentioned license plates. And I think this will probably be an annual story, at least an annual part of our top three, as long as you're still on the correct side of the prairie grass, Brad, if you know what I mean. Headline from the Kansas City Star. Missouri issued 100,000 plus personalized license plates. See the 25 that were rejected. Now, I should be clear. I should specify. It's not the 25 that were rejected, but 25 from the pile that were rejected. The Kansas City Star went through and identified them. Brad, you and I did something similar last year when the Kansas City Star did this. And this story, this is the disclaimer in the story. This story references profanity and might be offensive to some readers. Brad, that's why it's exactly up your alley, because it's personalized license plates and there's a little bit of inappropriate humor in here. Now, I'm going to put you on the spot, Brad. There's a story that came about, I think a little more than a year ago, that wouldn't have led to a bunch of license plate requests in 2024, but did lead to a lot in 2025. And it's an inappropriate reference, and it originated from a woman on the street interview. What might that be, Brad?
Oh, I know. It's the woman who had the world in her hands and could have gone on
and her mouth, right?
Right, whatever. And she got involved with some guy, and they did a meme coin, and nobody's heard from her since. She's disappeared off the face of the earth. I mean,
you're exactly right, Brad. It would be the woman colloquially known as the Hawk Tuah girl. Brad, there were 22 permutations of the phrase Hawk Tuah that the Missouri Department of Revenue said, no way, Jose. They went up to that Hispanic fest and they stole the phrase, no way, Jose. 22 permutations of Hawk Tuah were rejected. Now, my favorite part of the story, which I hadn't seen before, and previous versions of this story in previous years, was that some people submitted license plate requests where a word was spelled backwards. So, for example, if you had LOH55A, if you were to look at A55 in a rear view mirror, it might look like a donkey, let's say, and then a donkey followed by an orifice. So, Brad, there's some fantastic ones in here. Apparently, the folks at DOR caught there's a Colombian slang that's a bad word, and then there's a Serbian swear word. They got to have some really good AI go through these things. And then there's just some fun ones. There's like, references to, positions that are tawdry. We won't get into that, but like a lot of times people might use the number 1 instead of the letter I. So if you had a P and an N and then a number 1 and then an S, there's a lot of that. There's a delightful reference to, burying your face in a delicious piece of big white cake. There's just a lot of fun ones in here, Brad. So I linked to the story today, and as I usually do, I linked to a paywall-free version if you happen to not subscribe to the Kansas City Star. Brad, it looks like nobody's ever blocked your license plates, even though you get pulled over for them all the time.
Well, John, interestingly enough, I did have a backwards license plate, which they issued, and it was for my daughter, and the license plate was Adnama. And you know what Adnama was?
That would be her first name backwards.
Yes, Admanda was backwards. Adnama was backwards. And I did have a hell of a time getting license plates for the KSO or the crap truck, because of the fact that when I applied for crap, they initially rejected it, and then they said it would be okay as a ham radio plate. I go, no, it's not a ham radio plate. It's a radio station plate. I actually had to provide them with a copy of my FCC license to show it was a real set of call letters, and that took 4 months to get that plate issued. So, see, the crazy thing about it, and can I tell you something? You're going to go, oh, Brad's he's trying to sound like he's such a nice guy. I will say something first.
Yeah, Brad, you sound like you're such a nice guy. Go ahead.
I will say something first, so John it will diffuse John's comment. But my mom.
Okay, go ahead.
My mom had breast cancer, and she had a double mastectomy. And I was a big supporter of the, breast cancer awareness and kind of stuff like that. And I did have, for several years, I had breast cancer awareness plates, and they got so incredibly complicated to renew, and I think they've changed it since, because what you had to do was, and the bizarre part of it was, the lady who was in charge of this was the lady who used to run the Odyssey stations here in St. Louis, Beth, I can't remember her last name. The way it worked was you had to send the donation to it turned out to be a UPS store in West County, someplace off of Manchester. You had to send the donation. I think at the time it was $25. And then you had to get a letter back from them that you had submitted your $25 donation to the Breast Cancer Awareness Fund. And then you were allowed to apply for the license plates. And I can't remember the last year I said, okay, enough. Not that I wasn't, I wasn't obviously against putting money forward, breast cancer awareness. It was to the point where it's like, okay, this is getting too complicated, because there was something else he had to do as well too. And I think they changed that to the point. And you know what? I may go back in one of my plates and I may get that again, because you know what? And what's interesting was I actually had people say, okay, you're a dude. Why are you driving around with breast cancer awareness plates? And I would say to him, my mom ultimately, she didn't die of breast cancer, but she had breast cancer and she had a double mastectomy. And it always felt, is that weird that you're trying to help out? You know what I'm saying? You're down with the cause or whatever. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I don't think that's weird at all. First of all, I would question that anyone actually came to you and said, why do you have that plate? I think that's a good narrative. I doubt that actually happened.
Oh, no.
And then secondly, I love the idea that they have some sort of a hurdle, because people that aren't known for follow-up or execution, it keeps them from renewing their plate. It sounds like that worked with you.
No, seriously. I had several people ask me that, and it's distinctly two women, one of the women who worked for me at the time, said to me, why do you have breast cancer awareness plates in your car? And she was like, incensed that I said, you know what? My mom had breast cancer, and I know it's a real problem for women. It's whatever I can do to help out.
Yeah, and all those breast cancer groups, they've done a great job with the billions of dollars they've received. They've made a lot of progress on breast cancer. Brad, I hope maybe you'll have a listener send you a text that says something to the effect of, How dare you talk about license plates and not about that school shooting?
Man, I took some crap yesterday, and when I got off the air, I had a couple nasty texts as well, too.
Nice. It sounds like that person really enjoys getting a reaction from you, Brad, and it sounds like it works. I wonder if they're the same person that in the last few weeks has asked that you've gone to them and said, what would you change about me if you could change things? I wonder if there's someone that enjoys beating you up privately, Brad.
John, let me just say this as a programming thing, and sometimes I deviate from that. I try to not. We are a local radio station, even though we broadcast over the world with our streaming channel, blah, 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 blah. But we try to keep things local. Your section, the A block, with what you do is 99.999% local as far as, the St. Louis area, the various counties, and the state of Missouri. Okay? My section is not as much. I sort of deviate from that. But we try to address local issues, local problems, local concerns, local stories, correct?
Correct, yeah.
And every once in a while, and not only that, this is like the Maslow's theory of hierarchy, that yesterday, the day after the horrendous situation with Charlie Kirk, certain things that would normally be top stories become like way down in the pile, correct?
Yeah, it's a great way to put it, Brad.
Okay, so I'm not trying to justify that, but if you know the story yesterday, I had an educator who sent me a nasty text because of the fact I didn't talk about the school shooting in Denver. And matter of fact, I've got an update on that, believe it or not, because my friend of a friend sent me another picture. As of yesterday, they're still investigating the school shooting in Denver. And the thing that got complicated, well, we'll talk about that in the B block.
Yeah, let's talk about it in another segment, Brad.
It got complicated because they didn't know who the shooter was. That was the problem. And now they figured it out, and shall we say things have worked out well because the shooter's no longer with us. Okay, we'll take a break, and we'll be right back.